I stood in front of the mirror in the hallway, adjusting my tie. 74 years had taught me to be picky about my appearance, especially when it came to family gatherings. Today was my grandson Connor's 15th birthday, and the family was going to celebrate at a restaurant. I chose a navy blue suit that emphasized my still sturdy physique. Years of military service and work as a security systems consultant had kept me in shape. Glancing at my watch, I realized I had another half hour before the meeting. That would be enough time to get to a restaurant in downtown Sanford. I grabbed my car keys and headed for the exit, but stopped at the dresser in the living room. On it stood a picture of my late wife, Gloria. It had been 5 years since she'd been gone, but the habit of consulting her picture before important events never went away. I hope everything goes smoothly, I muttered, looking at the familiar face. Gloria had always been the diplomat in our family, skilled at smoothing over sharp edges. Since her death, my relationship with my sister-in-law, Savannah, had grown noticeably colder. Not that they had ever been particularly warm, but now I could sense some tension in every conversation. Savannah had never hidden her displeasure at my continuing to live on my own. She thought it was time to move into a nursing home at my age, or at least closer to her son's family. But I was doing just fine in my own home, and wasn't going to bother anyone. Military discipline and a habit of order helped me to keep everything in perfect condition. Every day I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, exercised, and ate breakfast at a strictly defined time. My house was always clean and tidy, my bills were paid on time, and my car was properly inspected. I helped Bradley financially. It was a natural thing for a father to do. I paid part of the mortgage, bought clothes and textbooks for the kids, and sometimes paid for their sports. My son worked as a computer programmer for a local company, and the pay wasn't bad, but it still wasn't enough money for a family of four, especially with Savannah's demands. In the last 3 years, I'd spent about $80,000 on their needs, but I'd never kept an exact count or demanded accountability. Family is family. My sister-in-law liked to dress well, went to the beauty parlor regularly, and dreamed of a more expensive car and home renovations. Her current job at an advertising agency brought a modest income, but her appetite grew every year. Sometimes I noticed how she looked at my house. Big, solid, standing in a good neighborhood. There was something in her gaze that I didn't like. It was as if she was already thinking about how she could rearrange it for her. A few times she talked about how the house was too big for one person, how it could be used more efficiently. Bradley had changed in recent years. Since his mother's death, he had become more withdrawn, calling less, visiting less often. I knew that Gloria's death had hit him as hard as it had me, but sometimes I thought it was more than that. There was a nervousness in his demeanor, especially when we were alone together, like he was hiding something or worried about something. At the last family Thanksgiving gathering, he caught my eye a few times and then averted his eyes, either on the phone or finding an excuse to go to another room. We used to be able to talk for hours about work, about his projects, about the kids. Bradley would tell me about new technologies, explain how the programs he was developing worked. I listened with interest, even though most of what he said was not quite clear to me. But over the past year, there have been almost no such conversations. My son began to answer one-wordedly, often referring to being busy, saying he had a lot of work to do. Children, Connor and 13-year-old Chloe, were the only joy in this family. Connor was into computer games and programming like his father. Chloe practiced dancing and dreamed of becoming an actress. Both grandchildren treated me warmly, although I noticed that Savannah tried to limit our communication. She always found an excuse to pull the kids away when we started talking. This was especially true when I talked about my military service or security work. The kids aren't interested, she'd say, though I could see Connor was listening with great attention. Chloe was a more open-minded child. She could talk for hours about her dance numbers, show me new moves she'd learned in class. There was something of Gloria in her, the same vivacity, the same ability to find joy in small things. Connor was more serious, more like his father at his age. He asked thoughtful questions, was interested in the way things worked, liked to solve puzzles. I picked up a gift for Connor, a new tablet he'd wanted for a long time. The box was pretty heavy. The device cost about $500. Savannah would probably find it too expensive, but the boy deserved a good gift. He was an excellent student and helped his little sister with her homework. In him, I saw echoes of Bradley's character at his age, the same serious approach to things, the same responsibility. Connor had never asked me for money directly, but I knew he'd been saving up for this tablet out of his pocket money for a long time. Stepping out of the house, I surveyed my grounds with a familiar look. The lawn was mowed, the flower beds tended, the mailbox cleared of excess paperwork. Everything looked the way it should in a decent neighborhood. My neighbors were retirees like me, well-to-do people who were used to order. We said hello when we met, sometimes exchanged a few phrases about the weather or local news, but there was no special closeness between us. Everyone was living his own life. I got in my car and started the engine. My sedan wasn't new, but it was reliable and well-maintained. I had bought it 7 years ago, shortly after I retired, and had had it serviced regularly since then. The mileage was low. I drove it mostly around town, with occasional trips to neighboring states to visit old friends in the service. Savannah had hinted more than once that it was time for me to buy something more modern, but I didn't see the point in spending money on something that worked well. Turning on the radio, I tuned into the newswave. The announcer was talking about local events, the opening of a new shopping center, road repairs, and the city government's plans to improve the parks. The measured speech was soothing, creating a sense of stability. I liked order in everything, in my house, in my car, in my plans for the day. I was not happy about the unexpected, especially when it came to family relations. The drive to the restaurant took 25 minutes. The traffic was light. The traffic lights switched on time, no traffic jams or accidents. I arrived first, as usual. Punctuality was one of my main traits, developed during my years of military service. I always came to meetings 5 to 10 minutes earlier than the appointed time. This gave me an opportunity to get acquainted, to choose a suitable table, to study the situation, to prepare for the conversation. The Old Main was one of the best places in Sanford. It served excellent steaks and seafood, and the service was always top-notch. The interior was classic in style. Dark wood, leather chairs, dim lighting. There were old photos of the city and paintings of local artists on the walls. The atmosphere was conducive to a leisurely conversation, which suited me just fine. I booked a table for 6. There were supposed to be 5 of us, but I always took a seat with room to spare. The maitre d', an older man with a gray mustache, recognized me. I'd been here many times with Gloria, and after her death, I'd sometimes come alone for a quiet lunch. He escorted me to a corner table by the window overlooking the main street. It was a good spot, quite secluded, but with a good view. After ordering myself a non-gassed water, I sat down and waited for my family. It was starting to get dusk, and the streetlights were already on, illuminating the sidewalks with a soft yellow light. Passers-by were hurrying about their business. Some were going home from their offices, some were heading to stores or other restaurants. The restaurant was not very crowded. Weekday, early evening. That suited me fine. I didn't like noisy places, preferring a quiet environment for family conversations. The waitress brought a menu and a bread basket. I looked over the familiar items, mentally figuring out what the kids would order. Connor usually chose a burger or pasta. Chloe preferred fish or chicken. Savannah liked salads and light dishes, watching her figure. Bradley was not picky about food, but lately he began to eat less, citing stomach problems. 15 minutes later, Bradley and his family walked into the restaurant. I waved at them, and they headed toward our table. Connor walked in front, smiling, clearly happy about his birthday. He was wearing a new shirt and jeans, his hair neatly combed. He was followed by Chloe in a brightly colored dress and his parents. Savannah was wearing an expensive black dress I hadn't seen before, high-heeled shoes and a purse from a famous designer. Her face expressed polite detachment, the usual mask for dealing with me. I stood up to greet the family, anticipating that this evening might not be as easy as I'd hoped. I could already feel some tension in the air, even though we hadn't even started talking yet. Connor was the first to approach me, smiling broadly. 15 was a transitional age, but the boy still retained a childlike directness in his interactions with me. "Hi, Grandpa. Thanks for coming to my birthday party." I hugged my grandson, feeling how he had stretched out over the past few months. Soon he would be taller than me. There was genuine joy in his embrace, and it calmed my premonitions a bit. "Happy birthday, Connor." 15 years is a serious date, I said, handing him the box with the tablet. The boy's eyes lit up as he felt the weight of the gift. He carefully set the box down next to his chair, clearly holding back from unpacking it immediately. Chloe jumped up next, standing on tiptoe to kiss my cheek. She was wearing a bright pink sequined dress. Surely a new purchase, especially for this evening. Grandpa Hamish, do you have a present for me too? She asked with a sly smile. Of course, I replied, pulling a small box out of my pocket. But today is your brother's holiday. Chloe accepted her gift, earrings with small stones, and immediately asked her mom to help her put them on. Savannah grudgingly complied with her daughter's request without uttering a word of thanks in my direction. Bradley was the last to arrive, extending his hand for a handshake instead of the usual hug. His palm was damp, and I felt a slight tremor in my fingers. My son looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, a slightly wrinkled shirt, a restless look in his eyes. Hey, Dad, how's it going? His voice sounded strained. I'm fine, how about you? You look exhausted. Lots of work. New project. Tight deadlines. He quickly averted his eyes, settling back in his chair. Savannah sat down across from me without saying hello. She pulled out her phone and started typing something, showing complete indifference to my presence. Her new dress, as I'd suspected, wasn't cheap. The shoes were expensive too, and the purse was from a famous brand. I wondered what money was being used to buy all this stuff if Bradley was complaining about financial difficulties. The waitress came to our table, ready to take our order. I'd already studied the menu and knew what I was going to get: a medium rare steak with vegetables, a simple, hearty dish with no frills. Connor chose a burger with fries, Chloe, baked trout with rice. Bradley studied the menu for a long time, asking the waitress several times about the composition of the dishes. He finally settled on the chicken salad. Savannah ordered a seafood salad and a glass of white wine. I'll have some wine too, Bradley said. I noticed that he ordered alcohol, even though he usually limited himself to water or juice during family dinners. Something was definitely bothering him. When the waitress left, there was an awkward silence at the table. The kids were looking at presents. Savannah continued fiddling with her phone. Bradley was nervously twirling his napkin. Connor, how's school going? Final exams are coming up, I started the conversation. Fine. I'm studying for math and computer science tests. I want to go into computer programming like my dad, the boy replied. That's a great choice. Your dad tells me you have an aptitude for it. I glanced at Bradley, hoping to continue the conversation, but he only nodded, not taking his eyes off his hands. And I want to go to theater college, Chloe interjected. To study acting. That's wonderful. You should follow your dreams, I said. Savannah looked up sharply from the phone. Theater college costs a lot of money, and then there aren't many jobs for actors. Better to choose something more practical. Her voice was cold. Chloe's only 13. It's too early to talk about concrete plans. Bradley tried to smooth things over. Some people start thinking about practical things too late. Savannah looked at me meaningfully. I realized the phrase was addressed to me, but decided not to react. Kids weren't supposed to see conflict between adults. The drinks arrived. Bradley immediately took a big sip of wine, which didn't escape my notice. Usually he drank slowly, savoring it. Today, however, he acted like he wanted to calm his nerves. Bradley, how's the project going? You mentioned you were working on something important. I tried to get back to the conversation with my son. Yeah, the project is complicated. A security system for the bank. Lots of responsibility. He avoided a direct look again. I understand. I had to work with security systems in my day too. In a different field though. Times have changed, Dad. What was relevant 30 years ago isn't applicable now. Bradley's voice became harsh. I was surprised at that tone. My son had never spoken to me that way before. He used to be respectful of my experience, interested in stories about my work. Of course, technology advances, but the principles of security remain the same: protecting information, controlling access, preventing leaks, I replied calmly. Savannah let out something resembling a snort. Hamish, times have really changed. Things are different now, she said without looking away from the phone. It was the first thing she said, addressing me directly. And she said it to me in the tone she used to explain things to a child. The food arrived. I concentrated on the steak, trying not to show any irritation. The atmosphere at the table was getting more and more tense, and I didn't understand why. Connor unwrapped his gift and admired the tablet. His joy was genuine, and it lifted my spirits a little. "Grandpa, this is the latest model." "Thank you very much," exclaimed the boy. "You're welcome. The main thing is that your studies don't suffer," I replied. "Hamish, can't you coordinate such expensive gifts?" Savannah suddenly intervened. "Bradley and I prefer to decide for ourselves what to buy the kids." I was confused. In all my years, no one had ever admonished me about gifts for my grandchildren. I bought what I thought was appropriate, and the family was always grateful. "Savannah, Daddy wanted to make Connor feel good," Bradley said softly, but there was no conviction in his voice. "I'm not arguing intentions. It's about discussing these things. Kids need to understand the value of money, not think everything comes for nothing." Her words sounded like a lesson she was reading to me. I felt irritation rising, but held back. The kids were watching us, and I didn't want to ruin Connor's birthday. "I'll keep that in mind next time," I said briefly. Savannah nodded satisfied and went back to her salad. Bradley drank the rest of his wine and ordered another glass. This was starting to bother me. My son wasn't a fan of alcohol, and tonight he was drinking like he was drowning something out. The rest of dinner passed in strained silence. The kids chatted amongst themselves, the adults ate, avoiding conversation. I tried to make conversation a few times, but got one-word answers or was ignored. When the bill arrived, I reached for my wallet, but Savannah stopped me. "We'll pay it ourselves," she said sharply. "Let me treat my family on my grandson's birthday," I objected. "You don't have to. We're not beggars." Her tone became downright rude. Bradley blushed but said nothing. He silently pulled out his card and handed it to the waitress. I could see his hand trembling slightly. When we left the restaurant, Savannah headed straight for the car, dragging the kids with her. Bradley lingered, obviously wanting to say something. "Dad, don't mind him. Savannah's just tired," he mumbled without looking me in the eye. "What's going on, Bradley? You're acting weird." "Nothing's going on. Just a lot of work. Stress." He took a step back. "We should get going." He hurriedly headed to the car, leaving me standing alone at the entrance to the restaurant. I watched them drive away, and for the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own family. The waitress brought the dessert menu, and I offered to order a cake for the birthday boy. Connor got excited. He loves sweets, especially chocolate desserts. Chloe, too, perked up at the sight of pictures of cakes. "You don't have to," Savannah said sharply. "We have cake at home." I was surprised. Usually family celebrations included dessert at a restaurant. It was our tradition. In all the years, no one had ever turned down a sweet treat on a birthday. "Savannah, let's not skimp on the celebration," I said softly. She lifted her head from the phone and looked at me with undisguised irritation. "Who's talking about saving money? I said we have cake at home. Or do you think we can't provide for our children?" The tone of her voice became openly hostile. The children fell silent, sensing the tension. Connor twirled the box of tablets awkwardly in his hands. Chloe lowered her eyes. "I didn't mean anything by it," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Just wanted to give the grandkids a treat." "Exactly, treat them. To show them what a generous grandpa you are." Savannah leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with anger. "And we're the greedy parents who don't buy their kids desserts." Bradley put his hand on his wife's shoulder, trying to reassure her, but she jerked away sharply. "Don't touch me. I'm sick of this hypocrisy." She looked at me again. "You think money gives you the right to interfere in our family?" "What interference? I just want to be a good grandfather." I was starting to lose my patience. "A good grandfather? You buy your kids expensive gifts without asking their parents, offering to pay for dinner like we're beggars, constantly giving Bradley money, turning him into a daddy-dependent mama's boy." Her words hit like a slap in the face. I was helping my son's family out of love, and she was presenting it as something demeaning. "I help the family because I can afford it, and I think it's the right thing to do," I said, trying to speak softly so as not to attract the attention of the other visitors. "Right? Is it right that you live alone in a huge house that your family could have gotten? Is it right that you keep all your money to yourself, giving it away bit by bit, like a handout?" Now I realize what she was getting at. This wasn't about gifts or dinner. It was about an inheritance. "This is my house and my money. I earned it with my own labor," I replied stiffly. "Earned it 30 years ago. Now you're just taking up space that could benefit a young family." Savannah raised her voice. and several customers at neighboring tables turned around. Bradley finally spoke up. "Savannah, stop it. Not here and not now." But she was unstoppable no longer. "No, I'm going to say what I think. I'm tired of pretending everything's okay. Your father is a selfish man who only thinks of himself." "Savannah!" Bradley tried to stop her, but there was no resolve in his voice. "Savannah what? I'm telling the truth. Look at him. 74 years old, living alone in a 5-bedroom house, driving an old car, wearing the same suits for 10 years. And we're renting an apartment because we can't save up for a house of our own." Connor and Chloe sat mesmerized, not understanding what was going on between the adults. I felt bad for the kids. They shouldn't have to hear this kind of talk. "Kids, why don't you go outside? Get some fresh air," I suggested. "No, let them stay. Let them know the truth about their grandfather." Savannah grinned evilly. "Let them know he's not as kind as he pretends to be." "Savannah, shut up." Bradley was speaking louder now, but she wasn't listening. "I won't shut up. I'm sick of bowing down to that old trash who thinks he can buy our love." The word trash sounded like a gunshot. Dead silence hung around our table. Even the waiters stopped walking beside us. I slowly rose from my chair. My hands weren't shaking. My voice was calm. "Say what you said again." Savannah stood up as well, her face contorted with rage. "I said you're trash. Old, worthless trash that clings to life and keeps young people from building their futures." Connor sobbed. Chloe cried. But Savannah continued. "You think we're going to put up with your handouts and smile at you? You think the kids are going to love you for your tablets and earrings? They only love you because they don't know how greedy and calculating you really are." I looked at Bradley, expecting him to stop his wife, to defend me, to say a word in my defense. But my son sat with his head down, clenching and unclenching his fists. "Bradley," I called out to him. He looked up. There was pain in them, confusion, but no indignation at his wife's words. "Dad, maybe we should talk later, when things have calmed down," he murmured. "No, Bradley. Talk now. What do you think about what your wife said?" The son was silent. The seconds stretched interminably. The entire restaurant stared at our scene. "Answer me," I demanded. Bradley stood up, his face pale but determined. "Dad, I think that Savannah is right about something. You're really only living for yourself. We've asked you to consider moving closer to us or helping us with a down payment on a house, but you find excuses every time." "I've never heard those requests," I said, though deep down I knew there were hints. "Because you don't want to hear it. You give us money for little things to feel magnanimous, but when it comes to serious help, you keep your mouth shut." Bradley's voice was getting louder and louder. People at neighboring tables were already openly ogling our family. "I helped you with your education, your first car, your wedding. I transfer money every month for your needs," I replied. "Crumbs! You transfer crumbs from your savings, and you're sitting on money like a dragon on gold." This was no longer my son. It was a stranger venting his anger. I pulled out my wallet and placed a few bills on the table, enough to cover the bill. "For dinner," I said briefly. "We don't want your money," Savannah shouted and flicked the bills onto the floor. A few bills fell at the feet of the waitress, who stood nearby with a tray, not knowing what to do. "Get out of here," Bradley suddenly shouted. "Get out of here. We don't need a father and grandfather like that." Those words sounded like a sentence. I looked at the grandchildren. Connor was crying, cradling a box of tablets in his arms. Chloe was sobbing at the top of her voice. But they didn't come up to me, didn't stand up for me. They sat next to my parents. I picked up the money from the floor and put it back on the table. "Goodbye," I said, and headed for the exit. No one stopped me. No one called my name. I made it to the door of the restaurant under the stares of dozens of diners who witnessed my humiliation. Outside, I stopped and looked back. Our table was visible in the restaurant window. Savannah was saying something to Bradley, waving her arms. The kids were still crying. My son didn't look in my direction. I got in the car and started the engine. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was steady. Surprisingly, I didn't feel pain, but a strange relief. It was as if a heavy weight had fallen from my shoulders. All the way home, I thought about one thing. How could I have been so wrong about my own family? How could I not see that I was just a source of money for them, that they only tolerated me for the inheritance? Parking in front of my house, I sat in the car for a few more minutes, staring out the lighted windows. It was warm, cozy, peaceful inside. My house, my rules, my life, and no one else who thought I was trash. At home, I took off my jacket and hung it in its usual place in the closet. The tie was neatly rolled up and placed in the dresser drawer. Each movement was slow, measured, as if I were performing a ritual. Maybe it was a ritual of saying goodbye to my old life. I walked into the kitchen and put the kettle on. Tea helped me think, especially in difficult moments. It was a dark night outside the window, the streetlights illuminating the empty road. There was absolute silence in the house, the kind of silence that had seemed like loneliness to me before, but now felt like a blessing. I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of hot tea and tried to piece together what had happened at the restaurant. Savannah's words rang in my head with crystal clarity. Old trash. But it was Bradley's behavior that hurt the most. He didn't just fail to protect me, he supported his wife, kicked out his own father. The phone rang half an hour after I returned. Bradley's number popped up on the screen. I stared at the vibrating device but didn't pick up. After a minute, the call stopped, but almost immediately a new one started. Bradley again. Again, I didn't answer. The third call came 10 minutes later. This time it was an unknown number. Probably Savannah from her cell phone. I rejected the call and muted the sound. I went back to my tea and tried to remember exactly when my relationship with my son's family began to deteriorate. It had definitely gotten worse after Gloria's death, but the roots of the problem went deeper. Savannah had never made it a secret that she considered me a liability in her family life. She wanted Bradley to belong only to her, and I was an extra element in that picture. Little by little, she turned her son against me. Subtle, careful, but persistent. She complained that I called too often, gave too much advice, was too involved in raising my grandchildren. Bradley defended me at first, but over time, he began to agree with his wife. And today, that process reached its logical conclusion. I took a notebook and a pen, a habit of planning my actions left over from the war. I wrote down on a sheet of paper, what I know for sure. Under that heading came the lines. My family sees me only as a source of money. Savannah thinks she's entitled to my property. Bradley supports his wife. The kids are still attached to me, but their parents form their opinions. On the next page, he wrote, what I should do. That list went blank for now. I needed to think it through. My phone started vibrating again. Messages were coming in. I turned on the sound and read. The first one was from Bradley. Dad, let's talk. That's not what I wanted to say. The second, 5 minutes later. Answer me, please. We need to talk about this. 3. Savannah apologizes. She was upset. I grinned as I read the last message. Savannah apologizes? I doubt it. Bradley had probably written it from himself, hoping to soften the situation. But there was nothing to soften anymore. Some words can't be taken back. Some actions can't be undone. The fourth message came, Daddy, the kids are crying. They don't understand what happened. Connor asked why you left. It was a low blow. Bradley knew that the mention of grandchildren would make me react. And indeed, for a second, I thought about calling him. But then I remembered the kids sitting at the table in the restaurant, not standing up for me. They are already making choices in favor of their parents. It's natural at their age. I put the phone away and went back to my notes. In the What I Should Do column, the first line appeared, protect my interests. Underneath it, contact an attorney. Then, revise the will. And finally, block access to joint accounts. The last item was particularly important. Over the years of helping my family, I had opened several joint accounts into which I regularly transferred money. Bradley had access to them and could withdraw funds as needed. The total amount in those accounts was about $50,000. Money for unexpected expenses, the children's education, and family needs. Now, after what had happened at the restaurant, I realized that this money needed to be protected. Who knows what Savannah is capable of in her rage? She might force Bradley to withdraw the funds, thinking it was fair compensation for years of humiliation. I got up and walked to my office. Here in the safe, I kept all the important documents, the will, bank contracts, insurance policies, real estate documents. Everything was neatly organized into folders and numbered. Gloria always joked that I kept paperwork like the army. I pulled out the will and reread it. Bradley was the primary beneficiary. He got the house, the car, bank accounts, stocks, and bonds. The grandchildren received education money, 50,000 each, to be put into a trust until they reached adulthood. Several charitable organizations received small sums. The total value of the inheritance was about $1,200,000. Not a bad sum for a programmer's family living in a rented apartment. Now I understood why Savannah was so nervous. She thought the money was already hers and was angry at every day of my independent life. The phone came to life again. A fifth message from Bradley. If you don't answer, I'll come to you. A threat or a promise? Either way, I wasn't going to talk to anyone today. Emotions need to cool down, and I need time to think. I wrote back, don't come over. Talk to you later when I'm ready. I sent it and turned off my phone. Went back to the paperwork. In addition to the main will, I had powers of attorney to manage my accounts, life insurance policies, deeds to a piece of land in a neighboring state that I'd bought years ago as an investment. All of this wealth had been accumulated through decades of honest labor. I started my career as a simple military engineer with a lieutenant's paycheck, served in Vietnam, risking my life for $200 a month. After the Army, I worked for private companies, consulting on security issues, designing defense systems. Every dollar was earned with sweat and blood. Gloria supported me in everything. We saved, invested wisely. We bought real estate when prices were low, sold when the market went up. She did the household bookkeeping with the pedantry of an accountant. I planned major purchases and investments. We were a team. After she died, I continued to live by the same principles. Didn't splurge, didn't make foolish expenditures, but didn't skimp on my son's family either. I helped regularly and generously, thinking of it as an investment in my grandchildren's future. Now it turned out that my generosity was perceived as weakness and caution as greed. I made a plan of action for tomorrow. The first order of business was to call my lawyer. Robert Stevens had been handling my cases for 15 years and knew the ins and outs of my financial situation. I needed to schedule an appointment to discuss changes to my will. The second item was a visit to the bank. The joint accounts needed to be blocked and the money transferred to new accounts that only I would have access to. It would be a painful blow to the family, but after tonight, I no longer trusted them. The third item is to talk to a financial advisor. I need to review all the investments and make sure no one but me can manage them. It might be worth setting up a trust or moving some of the assets to another jurisdiction. I closed the safe and put the documents away. The plan was ready, all that was left was to execute it. Tomorrow, a new chapter of my life would begin. A life without illusions of a loving family, without obligations to ungrateful relatives. As I walked up the stairs to my bedroom, I thought about how I felt calmer than I had in years. It was as if I'd thrown off the heavy shackles I'd put on myself. No longer did I have to pretend I didn't notice Savannah's coldness or Bradley's strange behavior. No more buying love with expensive gifts. In the bedroom, I changed into my homemade clothes and lay in bed with a book. I couldn't read. My thoughts kept returning to tonight, but it was no longer painful memories but plans for the future. I woke up at 7:30 in the morning, as usual. My sleep was deep and peaceful, surprising considering yesterday's events. Apparently, the decision I had made had a calming effect. I no longer had to be tormented by doubts or hope for changes in family relations. After breakfast, I turned on my phone. 14 missed calls and 8 messages had accumulated overnight, all from Bradley. The last message came at 2 in the morning. Dad, I know you're up. Let's meet in the morning and talk about this like adults. I didn't reply. Instead, I found Robert Stevens' number in my address book and called his office. The receptionist informed me that the attorney had a free time at 11 in the morning. I made an appointment. The next call was to the bank. I was lucky. My personal manager, Patricia Clark, worked at the Main Street branch and could see me this afternoon. I made an appointment for 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 9 in the morning, the house phone rang. Bradley's number popped up on the screen. I let the answering machine take the call and listened to the message. Dad, this is Bradley. I know you're home. Savannah and I want to apologize for yesterday. Please pick up the phone. Interestingly, it was Savannah who was going to apologize. Yesterday, she was so sure she was right that she was yelling about it all over the restaurant. She and Bradley had probably discussed the possible consequences of the scandal during the night and realized they'd gone too far. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw my son's car parked at the gate. Bradley was standing on the porch in his work suit. Apparently, he'd decided to stop by on his way to the office. I didn't open the door. I just watched through the tulle curtain as my son pressed the call button for a few minutes, then pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number. The house phone rang, but I didn't answer it. Bradley stood for a moment longer, then walked back to the car and drove away. He probably thought I wasn't home, or that I was deliberately avoiding him. Both were true to varying degrees. Robert Stevens' office was downtown, in an old red brick building. I went up to the second floor and walked into a familiar office with dark wooden furniture and shelves filled with legal reference books. Robert greeted me with his usual professional cordiality. We had known each other for over 15 years. He had been handling my cases since I retired. A tall, gray-haired man in his 60s, always impeccably dressed and extremely meticulous in his work. "Hamish, it's good to see you. What brings you to see me this early? You usually make appointments ahead of time." I sat down in the chair across from his desk and outlined the situation. I told him about the scandal at the restaurant last night, about Savannah's words, about Bradley's behavior. Robert listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "I understand your desire to protect the assets," he said when I was done. "But are you sure you want to make drastic decisions under the influence of emotion? Maybe you should wait a few days." "Robert, this isn't an emotional decision. I've been thinking about it all night. My family has shown its true colors, and I have to react accordingly." The lawyer pulled my folder out of the safe and spread the papers out on the table. The current will, powers of attorney, bank contracts, everything was neatly filed and numbered. "What exactly do you want to change in the will?" he asked. I pulled a sheet of notes I'd made the night before out of my pocket. "Bradley is no longer to be the primary heir. I'll bequeath the house to the local historical society. Let them turn it into a museum or something useful to the town. I'll divide the bank accounts and investments among several charitable organizations." Robert raised his eyebrows. "And the grandchildren? You were planning on leaving them money for their education." "I'll leave it for now. The kids aren't to blame for their parents' behavior. But the trust fund needs to be set up so that Bradley and Savannah can't access it until the grandchildren are of age." The lawyer wrote down my wishes, occasionally glancing at me sympathetically. "Hamish, I must warn you of the possible consequences. If you disinherit your son completely, he could challenge the will in court, especially if he can prove that the decision was made under the influence. What are his chances of success? Not much if the will is properly executed, but litigation is always stressful and costly. Maybe leave him a token amount. That would make it harder to appeal." I thought for a few minutes. "Okay, let him get $50,000. And not a dime more." Robert nodded and continued writing. "Now about the joint accounts. You say you want them blocked?" "Yes, there's about $50,000 sitting in them. Bradley has the right to withdraw the money without my consent, and I don't trust him anymore. It can be done quickly, but be aware that my son will get a lockout notice right away. He'll know something serious has happened. Let him realize the time for playing diplomacy is over." We worked out the details of the new will for about an hour. Robert explained all the legal nuances, warned of possible risks, and suggested several wording options. In the end, we settled on an option that protected my interests as much as possible and minimized the chances of a successful appeal. "When will the documents be ready?" I asked. "I'll have a draft ready by tomorrow morning. If everything is satisfactory, we can make it official the day after tomorrow." "Great. Now I need a certificate of legal capacity." Robert looked at me in surprise. "Why?" "In case my son claims I made decisions in an inadequate state, let me have a medical report that I am fully capable and accountable for my actions." The lawyer nodded approvingly. "A reasonable precaution. I know a good psychiatrist who specializes in such cases. Dr. Anderson works out of a clinic on Oak Avenue. I can make an appointment for tomorrow." As I left the attorney's office, I felt a sense of satisfaction at the work I had accomplished. The first step had been taken. The legal protection of my interests had been secured. Now I had to deal with the financial side of the matter. On the way to the bank, I stopped at a cafe and had lunch. My appetite was excellent, which surprised me. Yesterday, after the scandal in the restaurant, I thought I wouldn't be able to eat properly for a few days. But it turned out that taking decisive measures works better than any sedative. The bank greeted me with the usual business atmosphere. Patricia Clark, my personal manager, was a middle-aged woman with a professional smile and an attentive eye. We had been working together for 8 years, and she knew my financial situation well. "Mr. Ottaker, it's nice to see you. What can I do for you?" I explained the situation in general terms, without going into the details of the family scandal. I said I wanted to reorganize my accounts and limit third-party access to them. Patricia looked up my bank products on the computer. "You have 3 joint accounts with your son. The total balance is $47,300. There are also 2 deposits totaling $20,000. I want to close all joint accounts and deposits. Have the money transferred to my personal accounts." "That's possible, but it will take time. Deposits can be terminated with loss of interest. Current accounts are closed the same day." We filled out the necessary paperwork. Patricia explained the formalities and warned of the consequences. "Mr. Bradley Ottaker will receive a notice of account closure tomorrow morning. It's standard procedure." "Fine, let him know." The processing took about an hour. I signed a lot of paperwork, confirmed my intentions several times, and showed my ID. The bank bureaucracy was familiar. I'd been through similar procedures more than once. As I left the bank, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if I'd severed the last threads that bound me to my ungrateful family. Now Bradley and Savannah couldn't count on my money. If they wanted a better life, let them earn their own. At home, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and summarized the day. The will would be changed, the joint accounts would be closed, the medical certificate of capacity would be prepared. A few more technical issues remained to be resolved. Revoking powers of attorney, changing the beneficiaries of insurance policies, reviewing the investment portfolio. The phone was silent all day. Apparently, Bradley had decided to give me time to cool off, or Savannah had forbidden him to call again, deeming it useless. Either way, I was okay with the pause. That evening, I pulled out the family photos and spread them out on the table. Here was Bradley as a child, a serious boy with intelligent eyes. Here's his graduation from university. He's hugging me and Gloria, all 3 of us smiling for the camera. Here's the wedding. Savannah looks almost angelic in her white dress. And here are pictures of the grandchildren. Connor with the first computer I gave him. Chloe at a dance recital in her princess costume. Family holidays, birthdays, trips together. When did it all end? When did love turn into calculation and family bonds into financial obligations? Maybe it's my own fault for getting them used to helping out all the time. But is it wrong to help children and grandchildren? I put the photos away in a box. Some memories are better preserved, even if they no longer match reality. The morning started with a call from Dr. Anderson. The psychiatrist was able to see me as early as 10 o'clock this morning. He had freed up time between patients. This was fortunate, as I wanted to complete the formalities as quickly as possible. The clinic on Oak Avenue was a modern 3-story building with large windows and well-maintained grounds. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and fresh flowers. I checked in with the receptionist and went to Dr. Anderson's office. The doctor was a man in his 50s, with attentive eyes and a calm voice. He asked me about the reasons for my visit, listened to my family situation, and ran some cognitive function tests. An hour later, I received a certificate of full mental competency. "Mr. Ottaker, you are completely adequate and capable of making independent decisions," the doctor said, handing me the document. "Not for sure. Your reaction to the family conflict is reasonable and justified." This conclusion was another brick in the wall of legal protection I was building around my decision. Waiting for me in Robert Stevens' office was a finished draft of a new will. The attorney had worked through the night, taking into account all of my wishes and legal requirements. The document was legally impeccable. "Reread every clause carefully," Robert advised. "Make sure everything is in line with your intentions." I read every line. The house was bequeathed to the Sanford Historical Society with the stipulation that a museum or cultural center be established. Bank accounts and investments of $800,000 were divided among 3 charitable organizations: the Veterans Relief Fund, a children's hospital, and a homeless shelter. Bradley received $50,000, a token amount that eliminated the possibility of a successful challenge to the will. The grandchildren remained entitled to an education fund of $50,000 each, but the money was transferred to a trust until they reached adulthood. That's right, I said, finishing the document. We can execute it. Robert called two witnesses, a secretary and a paralegal. They confirmed my identity, witnessed the signing procedure. Every page was authenticated, every paragraph read aloud. The new will went into effect immediately, overruling all previous versions. Now for the powers of attorney, Robert said, pulling out another folder. Sure, your son has a power of attorney to manage certain accounts in the event of your incapacity. I'd forgotten about that document, signed 3 years ago for emergencies. It seemed like a sensible precaution at the time. If something happened to me, Bradley could take care of my affairs. Revoking immediately. We executed the revocation of power of attorney and notarized the document. Now Bradley had no rights to manage my finances. As I left the attorney's office, I felt a sense of finality to the process. The legal side had been settled completely. The technical details remained. Notifying the banks of the change in beneficiaries, adjusting the insurance policies. At home, I was in for a surprise. Bradley's car was parked at the gate, and his son was sitting on the porch steps with a bouquet of flowers in his hands. He looked tired and confused, his suit wrinkled, his tie loosened. I parked in the garage and stepped out the side door to meet him face to face. "Hey, Dad," Bradley said, getting up and holding out a bouquet. "This is from Savannah. She asked me to tell you to apologize." The flowers were expensive, white roses and lilies in a beautiful package. They must have cost at least $50. "Leave them here," I replied, not accepting the bouquet. "We'll talk in the house." We walked through to the living room. Bradley sat on the edge of the couch, nervously clenching and unclenching his fingers. I settled into the chair across from him, studying my son's face. He had aged noticeably in 2 days, new wrinkles around his eyes, his skin turning gray. "Dad, I'm really ashamed of what happened the day before yesterday. Savannah was wrong, and I was wrong to support her." "Go on." "We both apologize. Savannah is ready to come over and apologize in person. The kids miss you too. Connor keeps asking when Grandpa's coming to visit." Bradley spoke in memorized phrases, as if he were practicing a speech in front of a mirror. "And what do you suggest? Forget everything and carry on as before?" "Yes, I mean, no. Not exactly like before. We realize we've been too demanding. We won't ask you for money anymore. We'll be independent." I grinned. How quickly their intentions had changed. Yesterday, Savannah was screaming about my greed and selfishness, and today they're ready to be independent. "Bradley, be honest. What's changed in these 2 days? Why the sudden change in attitude?" The son averted his eyes. "We realized we were wrong. Thought about our relationship, about the kids. Or did you try to withdraw money from the account and find it blocked?" Bradley went pale, so the notice from the bank had already arrived. "Dad, if that's what this is about, I wasn't going to withdraw anything. I just checked the balance through online banking and saw that the account was unavailable." "When exactly did you discover this?" "Last night, but it had nothing to do with my visit. I wanted to apologize regardless of the money." The lie was written all over his face. Bradley had never been good at deception. As a kid, I always knew when he was hiding something. "What did Savannah say when she found out about the blocked account?" My son blurted out. "She was upset, but then we talked and decided it was only fair. After all, it's your money." Another lie. Surely Savannah must have thrown a tantrum and demanded to drive to me immediately to apologize. "Bradley, I appreciate you coming over, but an apology isn't enough." "What do you mean?" "What happened at the restaurant showed your family's true attitude toward me. Savannah called me trash and you backed her up and kicked me out. Things like that can't be fixed with a bouquet of flowers." Bradley stood up and began pacing nervously around the room. "Dad, we all said the wrong things. Emotions ran high. We didn't control ourselves. But family is more important than pride." "Family? Where was family when your wife insulted me in front of the kids? Where was family when you told me to fuck off?" "That's not what I meant to say." "You said exactly what you thought you were going to say. For the first time in years, you were honest with me." My son stopped and looked at me with desperation. "What will it take to get you to forgive us?" "Savannah is willing to make any terms." "Savannah is willing to make any terms for money. Correct me if I'm wrong." Bradley didn't answer. He knew I was right, but he couldn't admit it. "Dad, we're a family. We have children. a shared history, memories. The story ended the day before yesterday at the restaurant. The memories remain, but we have no future. I stood up and headed for the door, signaling that the conversation was over. Dad, wait! What about the grandchildren? You can't punish them for their parents' mistakes. That was the last trump card, and Bradley played it desperately. The kids will get money for their education when they reach adulthood. Until then, let the parents take care of them themselves. You can't be so cruel. I stopped at the door and turned to my son. Cruel? Savannah called me trash in front of my grandchildren. You kicked your own father out of a restaurant. And abusive me? Bradley lowered his head. He had nothing to object. Goodbye, Bradley. Tell Savannah her apology is not accepted. After he left, I sat in my chair and stared out the window for a long time. A forgotten bouquet of flowers lay on the steps. The wind fluttered the cellophane wrapping. The petals crumbled on the concrete. In the evening, the phone rang. It was Savannah. I didn't answer it, but I turned the answering machine to maximum volume. Hamish, it's Savannah. I know you can hear me. I'm really ashamed of what I said. I was upset, out of control. Please, let's meet and talk like adults. The kids really miss their grandfather. The voice was wimpy, fake. Every word sounded like a memorized phrase. I turned off the answering machine and unplugged the phone cord. The conversations were over. Now my new life was beginning. A life without family, but also without illusions. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of car doors. Looking out the bedroom window, I saw Bradley's familiar car parked just outside the gate. But this time, his son wasn't alone. Savannah was getting out of the car next to him. She was dressed in black jeans and a white blouse, her hair in a tight ponytail. Even from a distance, I could tell she was determined. I didn't hurry downstairs. Let them stand there thinking about their behavior. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang insistently. Then another. Then Savannah began pounding on the door with her fist. The sound was harsh, demanding. Hamish, we know you're home. Open the door, she shouted. I leisurely dressed, washed my face, and ate breakfast. The knocking at the door continued with varying success. Then it subsided, then resumed with renewed vigor. Finally, I decided that the neighbors might start complaining about the noise. So I went downstairs. When I opened the door, I saw Savannah's angry face. Her eyes were burning with anger, and her lips were pressed into a thin line. Bradley stood slightly behind, looking confused and guilty. Finally, Savannah exclaimed, trying to squeeze past me into the house. We need to talk. Stay on the porch, I said calmly, blocking the passage. Talk from here. What, you won't let us in the house? We're family. After what happened at the restaurant, I don't consider you family. Savannah's face reddened with rage. Hamish, enough of these childish games. You blocked our accounts and we have a right to know why. Not your accounts, but mine. I have the right to handle my own money. That money was meant for the family, for the children. That money was meant for a family that respects me. And since that family no longer exists, Bradley finally spoke up. Dad, we've already apologized. What else needs to be done? I looked at my son. Yesterday he had come alone, trying to act soft, diplomatic. Today he'd brought his wife for a more decisive offensive. Bradley, your apology seems insincere when you come with the very woman who called me trash. I apologized, Savannah intervened. Left a message on my answering machine. What more do you need? Nothing. It's too late to apologize. Savannah took a step forward, her voice becoming menacing. Hamish, you don't understand the consequences of your actions. We have children who need an education. We have a mortgage to pay. We were counting on your help. Don't count on it anymore. You can't be so selfish. You have more money than you can spend in a lifetime. I wonder where she got such accurate information about my financial situation. Surely Bradley must have told her more than he should have. My money's my business. Your business? What about your family? What about grandchildren? The grandchildren will get money for their education when they're of age. Until then, it's up to the parents to take care of them. Savannah and Bradley looked at each other. Apparently, this was a new turn of events for them. What do you mean? The son asked. I changed my will, set up a trust fund for the children. The money will go to them when they're 18 and only to them. Savannah's face turned pale. You can't do that. I already did. And what do we get? What does Bradley get? I hesitated to answer, enjoying their confusion. Bradley gets $50,000. 50,000? Savannah shrieked. Out of 1 million? That's a mockery. So they really did know the size of my fortune. I wonder how long they'd been planning my death. That's more than you deserve, I said, looking at her, considering your attitude toward me. My attitude? And your attitude toward us? You've been a cheapskate all your life, living only for yourself. If I'm a cheapskate, why do you want my money so desperately? Savannah was confused for a moment, realizing the logical contradiction in her words. This isn't about money, it's about fairness. Bradley is your only son. He should get his inheritance. Bradley will get what he deserves. Bradley finally decided to take more action. Dad, I'll contest the will in court. Try it. I've got a psychiatrist's certificate of full capacity. I've got witnesses. I've got a videotape of me signing the documents. The last one was a bluff. No videotape existed, but they couldn't know that. Savannah and Bradley glanced over again, this time with desperation. Hamish, Savannah spoke in a different tone, a softer one. Understand, I was upset at the restaurant. I had problems at work, I snapped. It happens to everyone. Fatigue happens to everyone. But not everyone calls older people trash. It was said in a fit of emotion. Emotions show a person's true attitude. Bradley tried a different approach. Dad, what about our history together? Have I been a bad son? Didn't I take care of you after Mom died? You cared as long as it didn't require serious sacrifice. As soon as your wife gave you an ultimatum, you chose her. I didn't choose. I was just trying to keep the family together. You did. Now you have a family of 4, and I have peace of mind. Savannah couldn't take the soft tone and exploded again. You think you're going to punish us? We get by just fine without your money. Bradley gets a good paycheck. Then why are you here? We wanted to restore family relations. Lies. You wanted to restore access to the money. Bradley made one last attempt. Dad, okay, let's say you don't forgive us. But think of the kids. Connor and Chloe aren't responsible for anything. The kids will get their inheritance. In the meantime, let the parents work and provide for them on their own, like millions of other families do. We have plans. We wanted to buy a house, send the kids to good colleges. Your plans were made on my money. It's time to make plans on your own income. Savannah realized diplomacy wasn't working and moved on to threats. Hamish, you're going to regret this. We'll tell everyone how stale and cruel you are. Your neighbors, your acquaintances will know what you did to your own family. Tell them. Just don't forget to mention what you told me in the restaurant. No one will believe you. Everyone will think you're a crazy old man. Maybe, but a crazy old man with money is still better than a normal family with no money. This remark finally pissed Savannah off. You're a disgusting person. Now I understand why you don't have any friends, why you live alone like a recluse. It's better to live alone than surrounded by people waiting for you to die. Bradley turned pale. Dad, it's not fair. Unfair. Was it fair to kick me out of the restaurant? Was it fair to put up with your wife's insults? Savannah turned and walked to the car, yelling over her shoulder. That's it. You're impossible to talk to. Live alone with your money. Bradley lingered for a few seconds. Dad, this isn't over. I'll find a way to contest the will. Good luck, I replied calmly. But remember, every day in court will cost you money, and I have more. My son gave me a pained look and walked away to the car. They drove off with a squeal of tires, Savannah giving me the middle finger through the side window. I closed the door and went back inside. The silence seemed especially nice after their yelling and threats. On the kitchen table lay the morning paper, a peaceful, quiet picture of ordinary life. I brewed myself some coffee and sat by the window, watching the street. Neighbors with dogs passed by, cyclists rode by, children played on the opposite side of the road. The ordinary life of ordinary people who don't have greedy relatives. The phone rang an hour later. It was an unfamiliar number. Savannah was probably trying to call from someone else's phone. I didn't answer it. Then Bradley called, then the unknown number again. I muted the sound and went about my business. By late afternoon, the number of missed calls had reached 20. They clearly weren't going to give up easily. But I had time, patience, and most importantly, the right to dispose of my own life. After 3 days, the call stopped, and I thought the family had finally left me alone. But on Thursday night, the doorbell rang again. This time it was all four of them: Bradley, Savannah, and both grandsons. Connor was holding a drawing, and Chloe was clutching a small box. I opened the door and saw a carefully rehearsed scene. The kids stood in front, the parents behind. Everyone had sad faces, as if they were attending a funeral. "Grandpa Hamish," Connor began in a trembling voice, "we miss you. Mom said you don't want to see us anymore." Chloe held out a box to me. "These are for you. I made the cookies myself." I looked at the kids, then at their parents. Savannah and Bradley were feigning grief, but there was hope in their eyes. They were using the grandchildren as their last trump card in this game. "Come on in," I said finally. We made our way into the living room. The children sat uncertainly on the couch, and the parents settled into their chairs. I remained standing, making it clear that the visit would be short. "Connor, show Grandpa your drawing." Savannah nudged the boy. The grandson unfolded a piece of paper. On it was a drawing of a family, 4 figures under one roof and a lone figure off to the side. The caption read, "Grandpa, come home." "That's very beautiful," I said, accepting the drawing. "Thank you." Chloe opened the box of cookies. "Try some. I remember that you liked them with chocolate." The cookies were slightly burnt and uneven, clearly the work of a 13-year-old girl. I took one and took a bite. "It's good. You're a good cook." The kids smiled, but there was still confusion in their eyes. They didn't understand what was going on between the adults. "Grandpa," Connor spoke up, "why don't you come to visit us? Mom says you're angry." I looked at Savannah. She sat with her eyes down, feigning contrition. "Connor, sometimes there are serious disagreements between adults. Your parents said some unpleasant things to me." "But they apologized," Chloe exclaimed. "Oh, Mom cried and said she was wrong." Had Savannah really cried? Or was that part of the play for the children? "Chloe, some words can't be taken back. Some actions can't be undone with an apology." "What did Mom say that?" Connor asked. Savannah looked up quickly, looking at me fearfully. She clearly hadn't told the kids the details of the restaurant scandal. "That's a conversation between adults," I replied. Bradley finally spoke up. "Dad, the kids are right. We apologize sincerely. Savannah realizes she was wrong. Let's forget this fight." "Forget? Then why did you bring the kids? To push my emotions?" "No, the children themselves wanted to see you. They keep asking about Grandpa." I sat down in the chair across from the family. It was time for a final explanation. "Okay, let's talk frankly. But first, the kids need to know everything." Savannah turned pale. "Hamish, why traumatize the kids?" "Traumatize them? Didn't what happened at the restaurant traumatize them?" I turned to my grandchildren. "Connor, Chloe, on Connor's birthday, your mom called me trash. She yelled that I was old and no one wanted me. And your dad told me to get the hell out of the restaurant." The children looked at their parents, dumbfounded. "Mom, is that true?" Chloe asked. Savannah struggled to find the words. I was upset. I didn't want to hurt Grandpa." "But you did hurt him, didn't you?" Connor kept up. "Yes, I did. And I'm really ashamed." I continued. "After that, I realized that your parents only saw me as a source of money. When I stopped giving them money, they came running right away apologizing." "That's not true," Bradley exclaimed. "Ah, we don't love you for the money." "Then why did you find out about the blocked accounts before you decided to apologize?" Bradley fell silent, realizing he was caught. Connor looked confusedly back and forth at his parents and then at me. "Grandpa, but you're a family. Families are supposed to forgive each other." "You're right, Connor, but families should also respect each other, and your parents don't respect me." Chloe cried, "I don't understand. Why are you two fighting? I want things to be like they used to be." I felt sorry for the children. They really didn't understand adult games and calculations. "Chloe, sometimes people show their true colors. Your mom showed what she really thinks of me." Savannah got up from her chair and knelt down in front of my chair. "Hamish, I'm begging you. I'm so sorry. I was a fool saying stupid things. Give us another chance." It was humiliating. The woman who had called me trash a week ago was now crawling on her knees. "Stand up," I said coldly. "This is indecent." She stood up, her face wet with tears. What is to be done? Tell me and I'll do it. Nothing, it's too late. Bradley tried a different approach. Daddy, okay, let's say you won't forgive us. But why should the children suffer? Why did you deprive them of an educational fund? I didn't deprive. They will get the money when they are 18. What if they want to go to college earlier? What if they need money for prep courses, tutors? That's up to the parents. Savannah exploded again, forgetting her feigned humility. You're a sadist, punishing kids for our mistakes. I'm protecting my money from a greedy family. Greedy? We only asked for a fair share. A fair share? What's fair about waiting for me to die? Connor jumped up from the couch. Enough! Stop yelling! I'm sick of your grown-up stuff. He ran out of the room. Chloe sobbed into her voice. Do you see what you're doing to the children? Bradley said accusingly. That's what you're doing. I'm just defending myself. Savannah wiped away her tears and looked at me hatefully. You know what, Hamish? You got what you wanted. You're on your own. Now live with your money and don't complain about being alone. I won't complain. Loneliness is better than bad company. Bradley stood up and called to his son, Connor, let's go home. The boy came back into the living room with red eyes. He walked over to me and hugged me. Grandpa, I love you, even if you don't love us. It hurt the most. The child didn't understand the complexity of the situation, thinking it was about love. I love you too, Connor, and Chloe too. Then why don't you want to be our grandfather? I'll always be your grandfather, but sometimes grandpas and parents can't be friends. Chloe ran up and hugged me too. Grandpa, I'm going to miss you. I'll miss you too, but it's best for everyone. The family headed for the exit. At the door, Bradley stopped. Dad, is this really the final decision? Yes. You won't change your mind in time? No. Not even for the grandchildren? The grandchildren will get their share when they're adults. Savannah pushed her husband in the back. Come on, there's no use talking to him. After they left, I sat in my chair for a long time, holding a drawing of Connor and a box of cookies. The kids really loved me, but they were being used in someone else's game. It wasn't fair to them, but I didn't have a choice. If I gave in to my emotions now, Savannah would dictate my terms again tomorrow. The kids would grow up and realize that their grandfather had done the right thing by protecting himself from greedy parents. I put the drawing away in my desk drawer. Someday, perhaps, I will show it to my grandchildren and tell them about how their parents tried to use their children's love to get money. After the visit with the grandchildren, a week of relative calm passed. I was beginning to think the family had finally realized the finality of my decision. But on Monday morning, a bouquet of flowers appeared on the porch with a card from Chloe. In childish handwriting, it read, To Grandpa from his loving granddaughter. Please forgive Mommy and Daddy. On Tuesday, a letter from Connor arrived. A story about schoolwork, new friends, and plans for summer vacation. At the end, he wrote, Grandpa, I really miss our conversations. Mom says you are sick and can't see us. Get well soon. So Savannah was telling the kids that I was sick, a convenient lie that explained my coldness and allowed me to maintain my image as a loving grandfather in the eyes of my grandchildren. On Wednesday, the house phone rang. It was a strange woman calling, introducing herself as Martha, Savannah's aunt. Mr. Ottaker, Savannah asked me to call. She told me about your family problems. I listened in silence. You see, I've known Savannah since she was a little girl. She's an impulsive girl. She can say a lot of things, but she has a good heart. Go on. The family is going through a difficult time. Bradley could lose his job. Their company is downsizing. The kids need stability. Interesting information. Bradley didn't say anything about problems at work. Either he was hiding it from me, or Savannah's aunt was making it up for dramatic effect. Mr. Ottaker, you understand that the children are suffering the most. They love Grandpa and don't understand why he rejects them. I'm not rejecting the children. I'm rejecting their parents. But the children don't share that. To them, you're one family, not united. Their parents broke the family ties themselves. The woman was silent for a moment, then changed tactics. What will people say? Your neighbors, your acquaintances? What will they think of a man who turned his back on his own grandchildren? Let them think what they want. Mr. Ottaker, I know you've been offended, but doesn't Christian charity demand forgiveness? A religious argument. Surely Savannah must have studied my background and knew I attended church occasionally. Mercy doesn't require being a fool. How can you say those things about your own family? I say what I think. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. Bringing in relatives was a predictable move. Soon, surely others would start calling as well. Indeed, on Thursday, a man who introduced himself as Uncle Bradley, my late wife's brother, called. I didn't know Gloria had a brother. In all the years of marriage, she'd never mentioned him once. Hamish, this is Richard Coleman. I'm Gloria's brother. Prove it. Prove what? Prove you're my wife's brother. Give me Gloria's maiden name. The man stammered. Look, it doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you're doing wrong to your family. You're not Gloria's brother. She didn't have any brothers. I unplugged the phone. The Bradley family clearly wasn't shy about their means, bringing even random people into the pressure. The next day, a letter from the principal of the grandchildren's school showed up in the mailbox. Mr. Jones wrote that the children were showing signs of emotional distress, doing worse in school, becoming withdrawn. He asked me to think about the impact of family conflict on the children's psyche. That letter was the last straw. They've drawn even the school into their games, made the teachers write emotional messages to me. They must have told the principal some heart-wrenching story about an abusive grandfather. I sat down at my computer and wrote an email to Mr. Jones, explained the real situation, that the kids' parents had publicly insulted me and were now trying to use the school to pressure me, asked him to stay out of family matters and focus on the educational process. The reply came an hour later. The principal apologized and promised not to get involved in family conflicts. Apparently, the children's parents had given him an incomplete picture of what was going on. Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of a lawnmower. Looking out the window, I saw Connor cutting the grass in front of my house. The boy was wearing work gloves, concentrating on pushing the heavy machine over the uneven surface. I stepped out onto the porch. Connor, what are you doing? Grandson stopped the mower and turned around. His face was red from the effort. Hey, Grandpa, Mom said you were sick and couldn't take care of the lawn. I thought I'd help. Savannah's lies were growing in detail. Now I was not only sick, but infirm. Connor, I'm not sick. There's nothing wrong with me. But my mom used to say, your mom says a lot of things. Not all of it is true. The boy looked at me confused. Then why don't you want to see us? I sat down on the porch steps, beckoning my grandson over to me. Connor, sit next to me. I have something I need to explain to you. He settled next to me, setting aside his work gloves. Remember my birthday party at the restaurant? Of course. You gave me a tablet. And what happened afterward? Remember the conversation between the adults? Connor frowned, remembering. You were yelling. Mom was really angry. You left before anyone else. And what did Mom say? I don't remember exactly. Something about money and the house. She called me trash, Connor. Said no one wanted me. The boy's eyes widened. Mom didn't say that. She's kind. People are kind to those they need, and mean to those who get in the way of their plans. Connor was silent, digesting what he had heard. Grandfather, but it's possible to forgive, isn't it? Mom apologized, didn't she? Some things can't be forgiven, Connor, especially when a person doesn't realize what they're guilty of. Was it my fault? It pained me to look at my grandson's confused face. No, Connor, it's not your fault in any way, but you can't change your parents' behavior. What's going to happen to us? Mom cries every day. Dad's mean. Chloe cries too. I hugged the boy. You will live like millions of other families do. Your parents will work, earn money, take care of the kids. And when you're an adult, you'll get money for your education. And until then, we won't see each other. I don't know, Connor. We'll see. The boy stood up, picked up his gloves. Then I'll finish the grass. Make sure you have a nice lawn. I watched my grandson work diligently with the lawnmower. There was some desperate hope in his movements, as if he thought a job well done would change my mind. When Connor finished, I gave him $20. Thanks for the job. I don't need the money, Grandpa. I just wanted to help. Any work should pay. The boy reluctantly took the bill. Grandpa, can I come sometimes? Just like that, without my parents. It was a difficult question. On the one hand, I really love grandchildren. On the other, any communication could be interpreted as a willingness to reconcile. Connor, that's not possible right now. Your parents are using you to pressure me. I'm not telling them. Kids can't keep secrets from their parents. The boy lowered his head and walked towards the wicket. At the exit, he turned around. Grandpa, I'll wait for you to change your mind. After he left, I sat on the porch for a long time, admiring the freshly mowed lawn. Connor had really done a good job. The grass was even, the edges neatly trimmed. In the evening, the phone rang. Chloe called, her voice shaking with tears. Grandpa, is it true you don't love us anymore? It's not true, Chloe. I love you very much. Then why don't you come to visit? Because your parents have done bad things to me. Can I be forgiven? I didn't do anything wrong. My heart clenched with childish pain. Chloe, it's not your fault. When you're an adult, you'll understand. Until I grow up, won't you be my grandfather? I'll always be your grandfather. But sometimes grandfathers need to live apart. The girl sobbed and hung up the phone. I realized I was hurting the kids, but the alternative was worse, letting greedy parents use my love for my grandchildren for their own gain. The next day, I signed up for a Spanish course at the local adult college. It was time to start a new life, to find new interests. For years, I had put off learning languages, traveling, and hobbies because of family commitments. Now I had the time and opportunities to do what I wanted to do exactly as I wanted to do it. 4 months had passed since that memorable scandal in the restaurant. My life had changed dramatically, and the changes were satisfying. The Spanish course was fascinating. I hadn't experienced such an intellectual boost in a long time. The teacher, Senora Martinez, praised my discipline and quick learning. In addition to language courses, I joined a local history club. We met every other Saturday, discussed historical events, and shared knowledge. The club members were interesting people, former teachers, doctors, engineers, all around my age. No one was interested in my money or made plans about my inheritance. I also started going to the gym regularly. The trainer was surprised by my physical shape and put together an exercise program tailored to my age. 3 times a week, I spent an hour in the gym, keeping my muscles and cardiovascular system toned. The house became more cozy. I hired a maid who came twice a week for general cleaning. I gardened on my own, read books I'd been putting off for years, and watched documentaries. For the first time in years, I was living solely for myself. The Bradley family didn't stand still either. Mrs. Wilson, a neighbor who loved to gossip, kept me regularly informed of their affairs, even though I didn't ask for it. Hamish, have you heard? Your son sold his car, she reported one morning over the fence. Didn't hear. Bought an old used one, and his wife stopped going to the beauty parlor. I guess they're saving money. Mrs. Wilson was obviously expecting some kind of reaction from me, but I just nodded and continued watering the flowers. A week later, she brought new news. And they've put the house up for sale. They're moving to a smaller apartment. They say it'll be closer to the kids' school. So without my financial help, the Bradleys couldn't maintain the same standard of living. It was predictable. Savannah was used to spending more than her husband earned, counting on my support. In early October, as the leaves on the trees began to turn yellow, the doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw Bradley. He stood alone without his family, wearing a simple jacket instead of his usual suit. He looked tired and aged. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Hey, Dad. Bradley. Can we talk? Talk. He shifted awkwardly from foot to foot. Why don't you let me in? It's cold outside. Talk here. The son sighed and began his speech. Dad, it's been a few months. We've been rethinking a lot of things. Savannah has realized how wrong she was. What exactly did she realize? That I shouldn't have talked to you like that. That family's more important than money. I wonder when exactly she had that epiphany. Probably the moment she ran out of savings. Go on. We want to rebuild the relationship. The kids keep asking about Grandpa. And what do you tell them? That Grandpa is sick. Chloe wants to visit you, bring you some homemade soup. Same old lies about being sick. Convenient way to explain to the kids my absence from their lives. Bradley, why are you here? My son was quiet, gathering his wits. We're having financial difficulties. We're moving into a smaller apartment. Had to sell the car. Savannah quit her job. Layoffs at the ad agency. And we're asking for help. Not forever, just to get through a rough patch. There it was, the real reason for the visit. Not remorse, not a desire to rebuild family ties. Just another request for money. How much do you need? 20,000 is enough. For the down payment on the apartment and emergency expenses. And then, once we get back on our feet, we won't ask again. I grinned. Same old song. Bradley, do you have any idea what just happened? What do you mean? You came to ask for money from the man your wife called trash. Who you kicked out of the restaurant? The son blushed. Dad, we've changed. It's the circumstances that have changed, not you. If I didn't have the money, you wouldn't have come here. That's not fair. Fair. Months of silence and then a sudden visit when you needed money. Very telling. Bradley tried a different approach. Okay, let's say you're right. But think of the grandkids. Connor dreams of a new computer for school projects. Chloe wants to continue dance classes, but they're expensive. Using the kids as an argument was expected. Connor will get a computer when he's 18, along with money for education. Chloe will too. And in the meantime, will they limit themselves to everything? They'll live within their parents' means, like most kids live. The son was desperately looking for new arguments. Dad, you see us suffering. Isn't that enough? Aren't we already being punished? You're not suffering. You're learning to live on your own. What if I told you that Savannah was willing to come and apologize in person, publicly in front of witnesses? You'll say it's too late. Bradley lowered his head. All his arguments had been exhausted. Final then? Definitely. Even for the kids. Especially for the sake of the kids. Let them see that there are consequences for actions in life. The son turned and walked toward the wicket. At the exit, he stopped. Dad, what if we move to another town? Start fresh? Move. That's your right. Won't you miss your grandchildren? I will, but it's better than letting you take advantage of my love for them. After he left, I went back into the house and sat in my favorite chair with a book. On the table was a postcard from the History Club members, an invitation to a special lecture on the Vietnam War. Next to it was the gym schedule and a list of recommended reading for Spanish courses. My new life was filled with meaning and interesting events. I was no longer waiting for calls from greedy relatives, no longer calculating how much money I had spent on my family this month, no longer feeling guilty for every refusal to help. In the evening, Mrs. Wilson called, Hamish, I saw your son leaving. He looked upset. Yeah, I guess so. What did he want? A talk. And how did that conversation go? Briefly. Mrs. Wilson realized she was not going to get any more details, so she changed the subject. The next day, the letter carrier brought a letter from Connor. The boy wrote about school, about new friends, about his family moving to another part of town. At the end, he added, Grandpa, I will remember you always. When I'm an adult, I'll definitely come to visit. That's the letter I saved. Maybe Connor really will come someday, and then we'll talk like adults, without the pressure of parents and family manipulation. In the meantime, I was living my life, studying Spanish, reading historical works, keeping physically fit, enjoying peace and independence. For the first time in years, I was truly free. I still had the money. I still had the house. I still had my dignity. And the family that thought I was trash was no longer in my life. And I didn't regret it.